Village of North Fond du Lac Board of Trustees meeting to order, Monday, October 14th. Audience members are requested to sign in the sheet provided at the registration table. Citizens wishing to be heard on topics not listed on the agenda may speak under item C. Citizens may be given the opportunity to speak during discussion of items listed on the agenda and are allowed 3 minutes for comments. Disruptive discussion or profanity will not be allowed. Roll call of officers.
Horning.
Here.
Price.
Here.
Streeter.
Here.
Stutz is excused. Will.
Here. Stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Citizens' participation. Citizens are to address the board only. Statements are limited to 3 minutes. The board may not respond to items not listed on the agenda. However, you may ask for an item to be placed on future agendas. Announcements, communications. Anybody have any announcements or communications? Seeing none. President's business and staff reports. Library. Heather?
Thank you. Since last Monday, I have spent some time at the Wisconsin Library Association Conference. So that's what I was busy doing last week, and that goes toward my continuing education credits, which I have to renew in May this coming year. So I have to have 100 hours worth of education and 10% in the technology area for that. And the only other thing I have is that there are currently 2 spots left for the group paint, which is coming up on Thursday, November 7th. And so still have 2 spots. That's all I got.
Thanks, Heather. Lakeside Municipal Court.
Yes, you may.
Court. Administrator Nick.
Thank you. As you read my weekly report, we had an IT issue last week, which consumed most of the week for me. We ended up having our mostly everything back up and running by Thursday afternoon about 2:30, so that we were down from Monday afternoon, and that included our phone system, emails, accounting system. So it was a bit challenging around here to try and get work done. At the same time, it was a lot of work to be done to put out all the fires. So Thursday afternoon, then obviously we still had budget to work on. So Thursday afternoon and Friday, I got most of the budget information out. I did hand some more out tonight because I didn't get it all done on Friday. So, but that was most of last week. That's all I have.
Thank you. Police Department, Darren.
Thank you. So in addition to the couple of things that I had in the weekly report, this past weekend we took a missing persons complaint, an endangered female, and today she was located in a hotel down in Ohio. So she is in custody and getting the treatment she needs, so that's a good thing. And I wanted to remind people that because of the weather last week, the homecoming parade was rescheduled, and it will actually be this Friday, even though the homecoming game was played this past weekend. The homecoming parade and tailgate party are going to be this Friday at 4:30 p.m. So we'll get the map. Try that again. We'll get the map of the parade route loaded on our Facebook page. Basically, it's that square from the high school on McKinley Street, Minnesota Avenue, Marco Street, and Thirk Avenue. It'll shut down probably about 4:15 on Friday and stay closed for the duration of the parade. That's all I have.
Thanks, Darren. Fire EMS, Jacob.
Thank you. Today, crews went out to Bessie Allen to do a presentation for Fire Prevention Week. That was last week. We were going to do it last Friday, but because of the weather, we did not. We did a live burn demonstration, so the kids could kind of see what what happens in the case of a fire in a small room. It's the same simulator we use for training our guys in fire extinguishers and getting fire suppression done quickly with hose lines, so on and so forth. We picked up the new engine last Thursday. It was, I'd say we were there for about 7 hours at Pierce, went through some things. They had to fix a couple switches and fix some paint. But other than that, it went pretty well. So it was back in the bay. We have a person that works with FAE, where our salesperson is from, that comes and does our training. So he'll be here on Wednesday at 4 p.m. to go through the training with the 6 guys on the truck committee, and then I have a handful of guys that'll be going through it with us to try to get that done sooner than later. And hopefully it goes into service the first or second week in November. That's the goal right now. And then, as of right now, we would sell 503 by December 1st, and get that out the door, just so we have some overlap, so we can get everything set up and everybody trained on the new engine. We had our raffle drawing this past Saturday. We ended up selling 340 tickets, which was $6,800 in profit. We give out $3,500, so the Fire Association made $3,300 this year, which is pretty average this year. We got our tickets about a month and a half or so late, so we had a short time to sell those tickets in. So we did pretty well for everything considering. I know I discussed at the last meeting a resignation that was going to happen on the 31st. It ended up happening yesterday. Thankfully, I opened up that full-time position last week, so today was the last day it was running. I got a letter of intent from a part-time employee, so I'm going to go through the loops on that and offer him that position, and we will bring that to the board at the next meeting. So that's all I have.
Thanks, Jake.
Yep.
Public Works. Sure.
Thanks. Public Works crew's been a little bit busy. We had a water main leak on Jefferson that we excavated last week. It was just a pinhole in the main that was creating a wet spot near somebody's driveway. Ended up just patching that one. We also excavated a water service, one that's been a problem residents for a while. We excavated that, replaced the curb stop in that water service. And crew's been out, we checked all our streetlights. We have a number of streetlights that are currently needing repair, either out or cycling, that are village-owned streetlights. We'll be out working on them, as well as continuing on ash trees. And then I have a meeting tomorrow morning with our DNR engineer for the water utility. It's time for our annual survey. They call it a sanitary survey. It should take the better part of the morning for Dave and I to sit down with this gentleman and go over everything.
Thank you.
Just a question, and maybe this was mentioned and I don't remember. How are we doing with the lead water services? I know we had a grant to
I
possibly.
can give an update on that.
Okay.
I can give an update on that. We did get a grant, $100,000, and we're working through the process. We have till June 30th of 2021 to spend that money. We are slowly working through the process. It's just kind of it's a large undertaking to try and pick which ones we want to target, so to speak. So we're really being careful about how we choose that, along with workload. So that should roll out over the winter and be available for construction, so to speak, next spring, summer.
Any rough idea of how much a single resident?
About 3,000.
Okay, so
Yeah.
there's quite a few. We can do 33 or so.
Yes, the issue comes in is that 3,000 is just for the private sector, and we really are only focusing on lead services that are on the private side, and that we know the street is not lead. So that's been the difficult, trying to figure out where those are.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? All right, moving down to consent agenda. Approve the minutes of the following board meeting from October 7, 2019. That's all we have on the consent agenda. Can I get a motion?
Make a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Following what the board meeting, consent agenda is read.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
We got a motion by Will, a second by Horn to approve the consent agenda. Anybody have any questions?
I'll just make a comment. You mentioned that's the only thing on the agenda. The checks will be run for the 21st and will be approved then on the November 4th meeting.
Thank you. Seeing no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Administrative, number one, discussion of possible action on general obligation fund balance policy.
If you recall, we talked about this quite some time ago. It's in your packets, your very small packet that did not include the budget. So if you recall, I brought this to you maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago. This was an example from another community that we got through our auditors. If you recall, I had asked that I wanted to simplify it a little bit, and I didn't like the way that they were using, the fund balance they were using, I wanted to use the unassigned general fund balance. The other one used something else in there, for their, and then the way they were calculating it. So I simplified it, it's down to one page here, and if you read through it, basically, I guess to summarize this is, what I'm shooting for is 30 to 40% for our fund balance, and that's based on the general fund budget as a whole. So if you recall, we were sitting right around that 40% right now. What I put in here is a minimum of 30% and a maximum of 40%, so to speak. So anything over 40%, the way this is written out is anything over 40%, there's a couple of options to be done with that money. The village board by a 2/3 majority vote can decide to use some of that money for the following year's operational costs, so to speak, to reduce the tax levy amount. It would take I think a certain set of circumstances to go down that road, but we definitely want it available if need be. The other option is if there's a fiscal emergency, the village board can use that money by a 2/3 vote. What ultimately happens with that money, as I think, Chuck, as you brought up, it originally was trying to convert some of that money over to the capital. So if you look underneath where it says general fund balance requirements, it talks about the unassigned fund balance shall be maintained between this 30 and 40%, and that because it increases the village bond rating, at any amount over the 40% target maximum of fund balance may be assigned by management and village board for future capital projects and or infrastructure needs. So the way this works is Chris and I, basically by the administrator and the treasurer will estimate our surplus. Like right now, we could estimate our surplus to be $160,000 from 2019. You know, we could probably estimate that. I don't know the number exact, but it's probably around there. We would add that to the 1.2 million that's already in there. We would say, okay, it looks like we're gonna be at 45%. At this time, we would recommend that the village board reduce the borrow by X amount of dollars to help reduce that debt service. That's the way this is set up to work. Chris and I forgot to mention weekly report. I put it in my weekly report, but I didn't mention it tonight. We had our bond rating call last week, and this was a specific question they asked us. And they said, do you have a policy for your unassigned fund balance? And we said, we are in progress right now. And they said, that is excellent. That's like a huge bonus for us. So, and then they asked, where is it at? And I said, between 30 and 40%. And they said, that's another great, I think they called it a AAA, like rating type thing. So it's very good to have this. The bond rating did ask about it. So it's definitely a great tool to have, a great policy to have. So I tried to simplify it so it wasn't so complicated, but at the same time, the other thing you'll notice, so that we did have a minimum. I just mentioned the 30%, but that is something I think that we should have as a policy in there. We try to maintain that 30% minimum. So.
Chuck?
I wonder why the last two words, or last second last word, infrastructure needs, why would we include that if this is more of a GO rather than a?
Well, it's capital.
Yeah, but usually the infrastructure, doesn't that take care of itself?
Well, infrastructure meaning roads, bridges.
Not related to the water sewer?
No, not the utilities at all, no.
I see.
I think it was just kind of it was capital or infrastructure. Capital being equipment purchases, and then the infrastructure being roads, bridges, I mean, the general fund.
Non-utility.
Yeah, definitely non-utility, yeah. And that wouldn't even be allowed, I don't think, by.
Okay. I see the word infrastructure, that's where my mind went. So,
Sure, yeah.
Anything else, Chuck?
No.
Question, it drops below 30, so how do we get it above 30 again? Do we budget more money?
Well, I think that the goal is to, the village board, the policy set for the administration moving forward is we try to maintain 30%. And if we can't, then there needs to be probably budget changes to get back to that target of 30%. The worst thing I think we can do is continue budgeting if we get below 30%, and then, it's to continue to use fund balance at that point to balance the budget, when maybe there needs to be major changes made in order to get it back up to that 30%.
We won't use so much of the fund balance for upcoming budget, you're saying?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay.
Anybody else?
think it's a starting point. I don't know if it's perfect at this point, but it's something we can get on paper, and then, you know, as we go through the years, you know, we may have to adjust it, but I think this is a good starting point.
Anybody else have any questions about this item?
Just a quick question, Mike.
Sure.
Because it's not official yet, this policy, did that have any effect on the
No.
our rating at all? Just so I
Nope.
know we're in a process.
They knew that we were in process, and they asked when we do adopt it that we provide a copy.
So we're not gonna borrow him for 2 years, right?
Correct.
So, I mean.
Well, that's the plan.
We'll put it into place now, but.
Yep. But we can still, through the process, we can still kind of allocate that money, and, you know, as we go through the budget process, this is something we will have to do to say, it looks like at the end of this year, we're gonna have 50%. So we know moving forward that we have that available, yep.
All right. Nobody has any other questions? What is the board's pleasure?
I'll make a motion to accept the general fund or to adopt the general fund balance policy.
Can I get a second?
I'll second that motion.
Got a motion by Horning, second by Price to approve the general obligation fund balance policy. Are there any other questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Now to number 2, discussion, review, and possible action on the 2020 general obligation TIF, EMS, debt service, revenue, and capital improvement plan budgets.
All right, so this would be kind of the final review of the entire general fund budget process. November 4th would be another chance to bring anything back if we needed, and then November 18th would be the public hearing. We will have to post, I think, on November 1st, is that right, Chris? So any changes won't be able to be made after November 1st, because that's when we need to get it to the paper, for the public hearing on the 18th, sorry.
Well, we can make changes, it's just what's published won't be
Right,
changed.
yep, you're
I
right,
mean,
you're right. So ideally, we'd get everything ironed out tonight. If there's anything that can't be, we can definitely address that, and if need be too, we could possibly get another meeting squeezed in like on the 28th of October. I don't think it's gonna be necessary. So I just kinda do have an order that I kinda just wanna go through with the board, just to kinda touch base on some changes and decisions that were kinda made throughout the process. The first one, I will just go to the general government section, which basically just to make the comment that the courts was changed to show the 32-hour part-time position. So that is now what you have that I had sent out on Friday. That's really the only change to that section. Any questions otherwise on general? We just talked about this the last week, so. If not, we will move on to the DPW, which would be the public safety. I'll just make mention, really didn't change at all. We talked about some information there, and we didn't change the budget for any of that at this point, so it's just in there the way it was. And then DPW, the only thing really that was outstanding there was the bulky waste, which Darren has a handout for. We'll just touch base on that, and he can give us a summary on what he found. I'm sorry, did anybody else have any questions on public safety before I skip that?
Thank you.
Okay, like I mentioned last week, I reached out to some neighboring communities that, to see what they do for bulky waste pickup and stuff like that. I put this into a spreadsheet so we can kind of look at things. Put down who has curbside collection in their communities, also who offers a drop-off site, and then if they do a special curbside pickup. And, kind of all over the board. Some have it done by contractor, some do it with their sanitation employees. Some do it twice a year, some do it annually, some don't do it at all. And then with the drop-off site, a couple of them have it around, year-round, where they can drop off metal items and auto batteries and stuff, where they do have some revenue coming back from those items. system that you can drop off anytime and then they haul it away. And then there are a couple of them that offer curbside collection by request, and that's based on volume then, starting at that $40 per cubic yard, and that goes up by volume. And then I reached out to see what it would cost us to get dumpsters brought in. If we did do the dumpsters at the village garage, we probably wouldn't be saving any money going that route. All that would do was, would change our labor. Instead of going curbside, the crew would have to be there constantly. We'd have to have someone manning it. Like we talked, to have assist residents to put the stuff in the dumpsters. It would probably be our loader or a tractor there to lift some of the heavy items into the dumpsters. But I don't think that would save us any money in the long run with the cost of renting the dumpsters and the cost of disposal of the materials.
How much, do you know how much we're paying Darren right now per ton to take it to the dump sites with the truck?
63,
Okay. So this is $80 a ton through the dumpster.
and that was with that company. I didn't hear anything back from the other two companies that I reached out to.
That's pretty typical, the $60 to $80 per ton for dumpsters.
So, if you look at the second page, that's pretty much the policy of one community, and I think I touched on it last week. A lot of the things that we pick up are things that could be in a resident's normal refuse. And this community does not pick up any of the small items. They only will pick up the bulk, what it is called bulk items. And this is their policy for that. They have a contractor that does it for them twice a year, but the contractor also sets up dumpsters for just wood items that would go into regular landfill and stuff like that.
You can't put wood in a landfill?
They don't recommend it where there's other places to get rid of wood items.
They bring in big tough grinders and things and recycle it.
Oh, okay.
But a lot of wood does end up in the landfill.
Okay.
Things that they look like, they're not meant to know, I'm surprised they don't pick up appliances like stoves, refrigerators, I get the refrigerators, surprised, it seems like all non-metal items are not picked up, so I'm a little surprised with that. I do like the idea where it doesn't, if it doesn't fit in the garbage can, leave it in the cart. I really think that makes a lot of sense, because before probably half the stuff kind of go in the dumpster, in a garbage can, so. Garbage.
I mean, I agree. I think that it seems like it isn't gonna save us any money. I don't know if it's even beneficial to, you know, do kind of what we talked about, but I think that's a great idea, like, promote it, and if it fits in your garbage can, then just put it in your garbage can. And it saves money for the village, it, you know, just makes sense, I guess.
When you say like, let's say a dryer or wash machine, is there any scrap value for that?
Yeah, a resident can take it right to the scrapyard and get some money for it too if they're mowing it.
Because I would think that if it hits up on the curb, those people that collect steel would eventually pick it up anyway, so kind of like, other than a refrigerator, like you said, or something like Freon that doesn't go.
So what do you wanna do, Karen? What's, I mean, what, you know, most beneficial to your crew, and what do you wanna do? What do you wanna see?
I was looking for options from you, but,
I mean, just personally, I mean,
yeah,
what would you
I
like to
think
see?
if we can promote it where it gets, where residents have to put the smaller items in their garbage can, I think the crew can do that in a couple of days to go around and pick up the large items.
So,
With renting a truck, the crew picking up like we normally do, but not pick up all the tiny little puzzles.
just like promoting this through the Facebook and all that stuff and just tell them, so people are prepared, we're gonna leave it if they have it out.
I think,
Just so we can move through and
Yep.
just keep things moving, I mean.
And I think-
that's one of the biggest things that I'm concerned about, is just spending so much time out there, and it's a safety issue for me also, because I got a physical job, you don't wanna, the guys don't have to do that extra stuff, I mean, you know, that's like when you're missing a crew member, so.
But yeah, if we can put it on social media in the villager and stuff, stating that if it fits in your garbage can, it's not gonna get picked up in bulky pickup. And then we may have to tag the resident and give them a X number of days to remove it. The next refuse pickup, it has to be gone by. And one community actually goes back and charges people if they have to clean anything up off their terrace at any time. If we had to do something like that, then we charge the resident.
How do they do that?
They tag them, and if it's not gone in that X number of days.
public property.
I think Chuck made a good point, I mean, with washers and dryers and stuff like that, all that stuff's getting picked up anyway, anything metal, so it's not like we're doing this to make any money.
Or we can put it out there that residents can haul it to the garage. Any metal items, we can take down to the garage and put in a pile and haul them in afterwards. If residents wanna bring them down, or they still want us to pick them up, we can separate that out. Allow residents to put metal out.
I just, would it be a problem if we allowed, as Chuck mentioned, like this, stoves, washers, and dryers, really, there's no danger with those as far as freeing and things like that. It's obviously a bulky item that people may have, and at the same time, there's probably not 500 of them sitting around, you know, I mean, it's gonna be a few, and there might be some value with them, and I think that's you know, there are certain people that just don't have the means to get this stuff taken care of, that's why they have them sitting in their basement. And I understand fridges, but maybe we could definitely consider including that in the allowable items.
Right, include the metal
I mean, do you have an
items.
issue with that?
No, I don't have an issue with that at all. We'll follow with a dump truck and load the metal in the way we
Does
do
the board?
currently.
I think the social media then is kind of, like you said, just identifying things that can and can't be done. Using this as a template. And then
Come together with a list like this, put in social media, what's allowed, what's not allowed. The allowables would be the metal items that don't contain the Freon or the televisions, the gas tubes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You can put in the water bill too, right?
Yep.
Everybody gets the water bill.
Villagers, but,
Like, put a link on, put it on our website and put a link to it on the water bill. To the whole,
Yeah, what's allowable and what's not.
Yep.
Mhm.
go ahead, Mike.
I do like what you're talking about, tags, give them, just one tag on one of the bags or a small item saying, just have it all made up and we'll put a twist tie and you give them so many days to pick it up and, I mean.
If not, they're gonna get charged.
It'll be on them for the cost.
That's why I let you go first, it's exactly what I was, it's exactly what I was gonna talk about.
Some good stuff.
Good.
Some good compromises there.
Chuck?
You know, a lot of times people have construction lumber and things. Would you consider them hauling, have a place where they could take that and dump it down by the garage? I know you burn the brush and everything else. It's maybe, you could burn some of that stuff. I don't know how much you'd get of that. Have you noticed on bulky waste is quite a bit of lumber and?
At times there's quite a bit.
It's never about it though, right? I mean, building, it's just not about.
Not supposed to be.
Not supposed to be.
I mean, I mean, personally, I'd like to just see, keep it simple, just, you know,
Not allowed.
just not allow just,
Demolition materials.
I mean, just to keep it cleaner and, I mean, if that's what we've done in the past, you know, and then just see how this goes, like Ann said, throw in the water bill before, I think that's a really good idea.
Get it out there every way we can. On the water bill, on the website, through social media, in the village, or
You think in August again, or?
it's gonna
I think we always stay away from June because of North County Fest and all that all over the place.
It's gonna depend on when we can get the truck from Waste Management.
Yep.
Their loader.
We try to wait till after rummage sale. That's always, we always had to make sure it was after the rummage sale.
Like after
Yeah.
July, right? I think that's what it made, like,
Yeah.
So was everybody Okay, with, just like keeping the way, just doing it a little bit cleaner?
Yeah. Just to continue the way we're doing it, just tighten up the parameters of it a little bit on what we take and what we won't collect. And get that out to the residents.
Anybody else have any questions or comments for Randy on this item? All right. Moving on.
If that's the case, then the DPW budget was as presented, pretty much. The only thing we changed is I did back that number down that we had talked about with the travel and mileage. Seemed a little odd. It was like 2380, if you recall, under travel mileage on the first page of the DPW. It's 308. It's at 1400 now, if you recall. Before that was at like 2380. It was just a bad number. All right. Questions on the DPW besides the bulky waste? If not, what? Oh, I'm sorry.
We're not as far as the playgrounds and stuff like that, I guess.
That's all included in here.
Okay, just one quick question.
Yep.
It's building repair facility, I just got a quick question.
Sure.
On the floors, the shrubs are on the concrete pad, what have to be done? $800. Just kind of curious what that is.
Veterans Memorial,
Is that what it's for?
yeah,
Veterans Memorial, South Veterans Community Center.
kind of all inclusive.
I'm not saying, yes, I just kind of
Yep.
That's it, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions on all of the public works? That would include facilities also, parks, playgrounds.
Nick, do you still have Darren's mileage reimbursement included in that 308? Because, you know, he's the only one that gets a mileage stipend.
Yep, I believe so, yeah.
Because it's like 400 every quarter, so that's why I'm questioning.
But that's utilities too.
So like, utilities.
Yeah, but I thought the larger portion was general fund. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, it should be. Good. If not, then the library, we did not change anything in the library from the last time we discussed the library. We kept the general, or the property tax levy at the 147, which is a 3% increase. No changes there. Any questions? If not, let's see what else I got on my list here. EMS would be next. The only change there was the discussion we had about the wage scale. And that, if you recall or have the old one with you, they were at one point it was -34 for the expense over, revenue over expense, and now it's at -30, so they did reduce that by about $4,000. Questions there? Sure.
Which way, we're not televised anyways.
Yep. You need your speaker in. Because we are recording.
Okay. What am I looking at here? Unclickables, so just a quick question.
Sure.
I mean, has that stuff that we added some extra ways to collect money, have you seen much improvement? You know, I thought we paid with another route, remember there was another program that you.
Yep, the
presented
TRIP
to us?
program, yep.
Have you seen much of an improvement?
Yeah, the only times you really see that though is during tax season. The TRIP program is something that intercepts taxes, so March, April, we'll see a little bit of an influx. It's not a crazy influx in income, but you know, it's a decent amount. I can't foresee it changing substantially, if that makes sense. The reason that it's lower than it was budgeted for this year is just based off the ambulance charges, if that makes sense, because we lowered those.
I have a question that I should probably know if they don't. Do they do, let's say the capital, when we buy a fire truck or an
Mhm.
ambulance,
Yep.
does that get charged against their?
Well, fire truck different, but ambulance, yes. Ambulance.
Okay, I'm just talking about the.
Yeah, so in this
I'm talking about
case,
the wrong one.
there was a borrow for, I can't think of what's in this borrow, but,
King Vision and a training dummy.
so there's EMS borrow in the borrow we're taking. There is some EMS funds in there, very small. So a very small percentage of those payments will be charged to EMS.
Okay. I was thinking wrong. I was thinking, I got fire, with the
Yep.
fire truck, I thought maybe that should be rolled back.
Yep.
But that's separate.
Yep.
That's a separate deal.
Yeah, I don't think they're gonna pay for that.
That
I
would
was thinking
be
that could help you
devastating.
balance the budget a little bit, but that's, I was thinking wrong there. Okay, I get it. No, I'm good.
We good on that?
Yeah.
Then the next section is outdoor rec. This is by, you know, under our wing now, so we do have to have a budget for it. They always generally make a little bit of money. It's basically, as long as there's a little bit of profit there, we're good. That's showing $2,000 of profit. It's a guessing game because we have no idea how it's going to go, but we do. I mean, there is, if they don't make money, we don't cover it anyways, so. But it does need to be in our budget. TIF is
Just
next.
Can we go
Oh,
back a
sorry.
little bit? Do you think at some point, I understand we took all this on, is it becoming, is it a lot of work for you guys to manage this? Is it a lot of work to manage those funds and the expenses and all that stuff? At some point, do we need to charge for that service, you know?
I mean, initially it was a mess, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I honestly wish we wouldn't have done it, but now I think we got a handle on it. It's working fine.
Okay, I mean, even if we
Yeah.
charge a little bit or something, because it's quite an
And our
asset.
auditors really help
Quite an
us.
asset for these boots out there,
Mhm.
for you guys to manage it for them. So.
I think, I mean, we've had a discussion before about other parts of, you know, North Fondy Fest and that, and I think at the end of the day, you know, a lot of that money does come back to the village park and things like that, that I think that's the least we can do from the village's standpoint. It's really, sure, there's some cost involved, but we also, it's benefiting the village as a whole, so.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if nothing else with that, we'll move on to TIF, and just the first line item there, you see a $512,000, that's quite a reduction from last year at 609, that's our tax increment, that's what we're collecting off of not only the village tax increment, but all of the other jurisdictions. There was a swing this year in our equalized value of the village as a whole went up quite a bit, and that's different than assessed value. So the equalized value went up quite a bit, the TIF equalized value went down a little bit. So based on the way the calculation works out, the increment that is available that goes back to the TIF was reduced pretty significantly. We expected a reduction, as I mentioned to the board at one point, the Northgate Senior Apartments was purchased by a nonprofit, and so that was removed from the TIF, the taxes that are being paid on that. So we expected a reduction. We expected it to be around the 550 mark, 560 mark. We didn't expect it to be down to this 512. There's really, it has nothing to do with the value of the TIF besides what I just said. This equalized value of the village went up, and the way the calculation all works out, it just reduces the TIF more significantly. So there's not gonna be any increment left over for this year to help out TID 2. But there's still time, and I think through Johnstone being put in there will help, obviously. And the TID was going to close a little bit early the way it was, so it might not close early now, but it might, which is still 2023. It's either late in 2020 or mid 2022 or 2023. So there's nothing to be alarmed about at this point, but it's just something we're keeping an eye on, and really we have no control over it, quite honestly. But the only thing we can do is try to increase the value of the TID itself. So.
What causes it to close? You said
So-
2022 or 2023.
Your TID needs to close when the debt's paid off, basically.
Okay.
So we have the debt sitting out there yet. We are allowed to use it as a donor TID to TID 2.
Mhm.
And when you pay off your debt,
Mhm.
it has to close.
Why would we not know when it's gonna get paid off?
Because we don't know what these numbers are gonna be. We assumed it was going to be 600 or 560,000 this year, and maybe
Yeah.
$600,000 next year
Mhm.
of increment. Right now, with it being 512, we don't know. Next year it could be
So
550.
we pay whatever we get, we pay.
Yeah, so it goes back to, there's debt out there for this TID along with helping the other TID.
Uh-huh.
And we're able to do that as long as the TID is available to be open, which is 2023 it has to end in that year. It's the end of the TID.
Of
Whether or not,
2021?
yeah, whether or not it's paid off in 2023, it will close.
Okay.
It was going to close a little bit earlier because it was doing well.
Uh-huh.
I would suspect now it probably won't close early.
Okay.
And we have set debt service payments though for the TID.
Yeah,
It's not based
yeah.
on what we get. But like Nick said, we had extra funds available above and beyond our debt service payments for the TID.
And we would pay that to debt service?
We would
because
probably
have
pay it
that.
off early.
Okay.
and close it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what causes the equalized value of I guess the village to go up and this thing to go down?
That's something we're trying to wrap our head around right now. It's equalized value and assessed value are two different things and two confusing things, quite honestly, because they use different numbers for ways of calculating when we get numbers from the state. So it's really hard to explain, but the way it works is you take your equalized value and you divide it out to get a rate, okay? So you have the number, you have equalized value, you divide it out, you get a rate. You take that rate and then you multiply it by the equalized value with the TID out, and just if you follow the math through, the rate got reduced because the equalized value was larger. Does that make sense? So the division, because we were dividing it into a bigger number, the rate was reduced.
Okay.
So instead of it being, 0.00052, it was 0.00048, and then you multiply it by a smaller number because the TID value, equalized value, is slightly smaller. And when you
Is
do
that because of the not-for-profit thing?
part of it, but not all of it, the real kicker to it was that the equalized value of the village without the TID increased, which reduced that rate. It's hard to explain. It took Chris and I probably an hour to walk through this. So,
Yeah, maybe you could show me the math sometimes, I guess it's sort of
Yeah.
interesting.
We
And
do
our ta-
have the spreadsheet
We do
that
have
we
the
can
spreadsheet, yeah.
email you.
Oh, sure,
we
yeah,
can
yeah.
send it.
Yeah.
It's-
So I guess on our tax bills, it's the equalized value that your taxes are based off of, is that right? Or
No,
No,
the assessed
It's
value.
your assessed value.
But isn't there a ratio?
Yep,
Right.
Is that different?
it's about 90%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is different than that ratio.
Right, the
Okay.
ratio has nothing to do with the equalized value, just your assessed value.
Okay.
So that's what you're being taxed on, like Nick said, if our assessment ratio is at 90%, you're being taxed on 90% of whatever your assessed value.
Okay.
And really, equalized value only comes into play through the TIF portion.
Only the tip.
It doesn't affect
Yeah.
anything else in this budget.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
I have one quick question.
Yep.
TIF two,
Mhm.
it's on last year, we're gonna go to miscellaneous revenue, I take it that's coming from TIF one, I think. My
Yep.
question is, we budgeted 27, why did we decide to go with 63 to pay off, pay that much into TIF, you understand what I'm saying there?
So miscellaneous
We budgeted
revenue, we budgeted
27 and all of a sudden
$27,000.
it'll be
That's
63, so what made us change that
The-
to bring that revenue over
Chris.
here?
So that's just the audited amount, right, Chris? That
Right.
we ended up thinking we were gonna have 27.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we budgeted, what we do is whatever's left over from one. Now, as revenues or different things happen, or we maybe don't spend as much money as we thought in TIF one, that gives us that extra revenue to throw into TIF two. Obviously, everything doesn't get decided until the auditors come in March, and then we'll have final numbers, but we like to have the number up on top, zeroed out for TIF one.
Got it.
And so we transfer everything out that we possibly can to TIF two. And so at the time that we, just like putting the budget together right now, we're just guessing what we're gonna have for expenses in TIF two. We don't know. I mean, the guys could spend a lot more hours, maybe we'll have more snowstorms or, this or that, or mowing or something like that, whatever expenses, or there might be some site cleanup or
Mhm.
something like that that we didn't plan
Some
for.
engineering.
That fluctuates
Well,
though.
that's just a good thing, because we're not budgeting any money next year, forecasting money going to TIF two, so this can help that out a little bit, right? You put more in this year than you expect in the TIF two.
Well, right now, we're not gonna have anything going to TIF two.
For
Next year,
2020.
But this year, we put in almost twice as much as we
Oh,
wanted.
sure,
So-
yeah, the
So I'm
63.
saying we can, by not doing it next
Yeah,
year,
yeah,
this year, help
yeah. Gotcha.
offset that.
Yep.
Okay, very good.
Any other questions with TIF? No? Moving on then to capital. The board you'd asked about the capital, we've definitely discussed this at length. We've kind of approved, well, we have approved the borrow portion of this already at $686,000 for 2019. The detail would be the first 2 pages, and then the entire 5-year CIP would be the following pages. Nothing has changed in this since we've discussed this last and did have consensus at that point.
I do have a question I should have probably asked before, but is that 90,000 a good number? That seems to be for that pole. replasting, that's a total boatload of money.
So what is that?
90,000 for the
Research is
replastering.
in the-
Plastering.
Oh, that's cool, I mean, that's a huge number, holy man.
Do you know if the city redid theirs? Do you know if the city redid theirs? I do not know that.
Yep.
Can you give you a lifespan on that, or?
The last one has been 15 years since we did it.
Anything different being done this time from last time, or pretty much the same process?
Pretty much same process, tearing all the old stuff down, patching the concrete, and then replastering everything.
Are we doing any of that work, or is that all?
It's all contractor.
I have one more, while I
Yep.
wasn't talking, I mean, I just got a question on this carpeting every,
Mhm.
5,000 every other year. You ever talked about going to vinyl plank and getting rid of the carpeting?
Yeah, we have.
And this way that it just holds up forever.
There, in certain areas, we have. In certain areas, I don't think it's a good idea either. We have definitely gone to the carpet squares.
Yeah.
And a little bit easier to replace here and there if you get some wear areas. But we've talked about doing that across the hall, in some areas where we get a lot of mud traffic, but,
We've changed some places that were hard used that it holds up
yeah,
very, very well.
yep. And that's something it's,
Especially
those are
tile.
placeholders in that budget.
Especially tile floor or something that there's no maintenance in that stuff. I mean, compared to VCT compared to vinyl plank.
Sure, the waxing and the stripping,
Yeah,
and all that,
there's
yeah.
no maintenance. to
Yeah.
it. That's
No,
just
that's
a
a good
thought.
point. I'm sure Darren will keep that in mind. Anything else on capital? If not, I did include debt service in the handouts tonight. There's not a whole lot to talk about there, other than I will mention that it's $666,000. That's reduced from $698,000. And if you look back for the last several years, it was probably near that $700,000 mark, which is very beneficial. And if you look at our projections, we're hoping to lower that a little bit even more, so. Really nothing we can do about those numbers. Also, then, kind of a large section that we haven't discussed would be another handout, the revenue section. So, the revenues look good. A couple things I just wanted to touch base on. One of those being that first property tax levy number. If you look last year, it was $559,000. Next year, it's $607,000. It's $48,000. That's largely due to the fact that I just said, that the debt service is reduced by significant numbers. I also included in this right now is a 2% increase to the levy amount, okay? So that does not mean a 2% tax increase. It means our levy amount was $1,555,000 about. That's 2% over what it was last year. We'll get to the publication page, you'll see the actual tax rate itself. But so that's why you'll see that property tax levy being increased significantly. 1% increase is approximately $14,000. So $28,000 approximately is how much that 2% increase was. The other thing I just want to touch on in that same top section was the interest. We've seen the interest amount go from 0 to quite a bit and over the last probably 6 years, Chris. I mean, at times we were $10,000 and it's just increased significantly. So we're making a lot of money on our bank interest right now. As you see, we're gonna make $80,000 this year, next year $75,000. However, as soon as that has gone up, it can go back down. So I wanna be careful that we don't assume that that's gonna be there next year. And we did budget 75, but the year after, that could be back to $15,000, $20,000. So we just have to be careful when going through this that we don't consider that every year for our operational. Some of the other numbers you'll see, use of fund balance on the page you have.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I handed this out
The
tonight.
investment's in the middle on the second page.
We're on it says revenue in the top. Am I doing the
Oh, you're on the
summary? I'm on the
summary,
summary, I'm sorry. I meant revenue and then I saw revenue on the top of the summary. I apologize. I'm gonna go to the actual revenue page now. Sorry. Is everybody there? I skipped that section. Okay, so then the 607 would be the property taxes. The mobile home taxes, you'll see that increased a fair amount too. And then that with the tax in was another $190,000, so that total is $800,000 up top. Moving down to intergovernmental revenues, you see quite an increase in the transportation aid, that 43530. That transportation aid is a calculation that I spent, it was maybe it was probably more like 8 or 10 years ago. I took about a week to try and figure out that calculation, but it takes in consideration your budget numbers from like the last 5 years, and it looks at certain things like police departments, how much you spend on roads, what you spend on capital projects. Puts it all in this big calculation, along with the fact that the state increased that funding a little bit this last year. So we had a nice increase there of $24,000.
You're talking about that, do they make you spend it on transportation?
No,
Just
no.
your budget?
Yeah. The other big change you'll see is at the bottom in that section, the school resource officer, if you recall, Darren and I approached the school about getting that straightened out. We're actually getting 50% of wages and benefits, and they were in agreement with that. So you'll see that not only for 2019, but then budgeting that for 2020. That's a huge increase in the revenue there.
Nick, that
Yep.
video service fee, is that some new program? Middle of the $6,800, $6,825, it's intergovernmental.
That is that's what the cable companies, right, Chris? Cable
Yeah,
companies
it's-
have to pay us,
it's
it's like a
something-
man.
it's brand new.
Oh,
This is the
that
first.
part of it, yes, is
Yeah.
the 60.
We haven't anything in the past, so.
It's right in the middle, 43525.
That was part of that, if you recall, during the
I-
budget process, there was like, the transportation aid went up, that was one of the
Yes.
things they
Yeah.
added in the budget
Okay, all right.
process. Yep,
Thanks.
Does that come from the state then?
Mhm.
yes. Department of Revenue.
And you did say that SRO, that now they took all benefits and everything else, right?
Yep.
And 50%, yeah?
Correct. Yep.
That's great.
If-
Yes.
The shared revenue, is that a solid number, or is that just an estimate?
That's a solid number.
Oh, it increased it now, I'm surprised.
No, that got pulled back out. There was a proposal to increase that, and that got pulled out. Yep.
Isn't anything edging
Especially
down?
those government, I'm surprised.
Yep.
Right, I agree.
So, I guess moving on to the next licenses and permits section. I don't have much to say there, except if electrical, plumbing, and heating, you'll see some significant increases from what we budgeted. That was largely due to the school and some other, we had a lot of construction this year, and I don't think that's obviously going to continue, so we want to be careful that we don't assume that that's going to continue. Just wanted to note that. We talked about the court revenues last week, that, we're budgeting around that 352 for the total for the year. That's slightly still a little bit higher than what we think we're gonna get for this year, so. No questions on that. I really have nothing to say about the public charges for service. It's pretty,
What about the pool fees? 46722. It says we're gonna
Yep.
make 37 this year, but we're
Sure,
only budgeting 26.
sure. So I knew there was gonna be a question. So the school reimburses us for swimming lessons, and we don't budget it. It gets shown as, it hits that account.
Uh-huh.
It's shown as an estimated actual, but it really, there's $11,000 that's going to be Chris, you better probably explain
Well,
this
that's
better.
why if you look at the expenses for wages,
Mhm.
that's over by the 11,000,
Oh, okay.
and then the revenue is going to be up by 11,000, and that's to pay for the wages
Sure.
going over.
So if it happens, it's just a wash?
basically.
It's a wash.
It's exactly a wash, yep.
Okay.
So the way we budget it is we budget it correctly, so it's true, the 26,000, and then we actually budget the true wages rather than increasing it, because we never know where it's gonna end up, so they just end up washing each other.
Yeah, because if lessons get canceled, or they don't run as many sessions or something like that, it's too hard to predict the wages and the revenue for that, so we just let it play itself out, and when we bill it, whatever we went over in wages, we get back in revenue.
Okay.
Good question. Investment interest earnings, I mentioned that already when I was talking on the summary page, but you'll notice that that's increased significantly. You can see that in 2019, we only budgeted $30,000, and I think the year prior it was like 20 or so that we budgeted, and it's just been continuing to increase. Questions on that? I don't have anything really to say on the rest of that page.
Yeah.
Questions?
Clerk fees, so it says we have 19,000 extra this year, but we're only budgeting 7 next year?
Yeah, we looked that up, Chris.
I know,
Chris and
We
I
received a
looked at that last
specific
week.
payment, I know, why didn't we write it down?
It was a one-time thing. It was
What
just-
are clerk fees for?
That's kind of like just our miscellaneous catch-all, basically, revenue
Licenses,
account. Just odds and ends, things that we get money for or payments for. I can't remember what.
We can follow up with an
Our,
email. We did look at that, I just can't recall.
yeah, like police lockouts go there, special assessment letters go in there, just,
Okay.
yeah, some odds and ends. But we received, yeah, one very large
Yeah,
payment,
can't
now
remember
I
what
can
it was.
think of it, yeah.
We're done with the miscellaneous court fees?
Clerk.
Clerk fees, yeah.
Yep, yep. Yeah, it's historically, it's right around $7,000, but we caught that, we saw that too when we looked at it, and I can't recall what it was.
Looking at too many guys.
It's,
The breakdown.
Oh.
There's no breakdown.
Okay, all right.
Yep. We can follow up with an email in.
okay.
Clerk fees. Moving on to the next page, the insurance refund, you'll notice that one kind of stands out. It was budgeted at 25, we're gonna be at 25,000. We budgeted 2,500, that was, I think that was the FEMA payment, correct?
Mhm.
So we had
No,
to,
yeah,
yeah, we had, because of all the storm last year, we got payment finally, and it was, so that's where that number's so much higher.
So what do we think the 12 is gonna be then?
well, we also get our dividend check.
Yes,
Which
that was
has been-
the dividend for,
Overall, the whole League of Municipalities, they, whatever money they
That's what that is. That's
save
not
for the
different.
entire year, they give back to all the communities, and it has been traditionally higher now, they've been doing so well. We've seen ours increase considerably.
I wrote that down wrong. I have FEMA listed here for, and it's not FEMA, that is what we just talked about last week, it's the workers' compensation check, we got $25,000 check, and we're expecting to get another check next year, but it's not gonna be quite as big,
Oh, okay.
because of our mod factor, that whole thing.
Yeah,
Remember
yeah.
that discussion?
Yeah.
Then the other thing I will mention on this page is use of fund balance. You've noticed, if you recall, the use of fund balance and then the contingency expense part of this we use for the levy limit payment that we get, and not levy limit, the expenditure restraint payment we get, it's about $46,000. So last year we had put 173 in here, it really wasn't probably expected to be there, but that's zeroed out. When we get into the summary portion, it's actually in there to make that balance out. So that's about all I have to say about the revenues. Any questions?
On the summary sheet, Nick, there is that use of fund balance of 87,000.
Right, that's what I just said, that,
But shouldn't that be in there?
that's what I'm saying, it's not in there because I sent these out last week,
Oh, gotcha.
and this was
Okay.
sent,
Okay.
done today.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's why I said, when I get to the summary page, we're gonna talk about that. Yep.
Right.
Any questions on the revenues?
Do you have anything for contingency in here then?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Anything on, more on the revenues? If not, we can move on to the summary then, which I already started on inadvertently. So, getting back to,
What summary are we talking about?
it says 2020 summary right on the top. I handed it out tonight. It's 2 pages.
I got it.
So, this is just summarizing everything we basically just looked at. It's just simplifying it, making it the summary. So, if you scroll down this page, you'll look at use of fund balance. It says $87,000. I just told you we didn't have anything in the revenue section because of what I just said. I sent those out last week. Chris and I needed to finish a few of the numbers today on the budget, so we do have it in there now the way we wanted it. If you look at the expenses below, you'll see contingency, about a third of the way down on expenses. That's showing 155. Okay, so basically what we're doing there is our expenditure restraint is about 2.7%. We don't know that number yet exact, but we're assuming about the same as last year. So we can increase our general fund budget by 2.7%, no more than that, and still receive our expenditure restraint payment of about $46,000. But we also don't want to limit ourselves next year. We do this every year. So We want to increase our expenses to get right to that threshold, and then we balance that with use of fund balance. So if you do the math here, you're gonna notice that we're spending $155,000, but we're only using $87,000 to cover that. That's because this budget, prior to those numbers being in there, has about a $68,000 surplus. So this budget is in very good shape. Revenue-wise, there's about 67?
67.
If you subtract the 87 from the
Can I ask
vice
you-
versa. Yeah.
Shouldn't December be zero right here though?
Well, you have to just look at
Just hang on, yeah, we'll get to that, that's because of the EMS.
Oh, okay.
So,
Oh, okay.
so this does balance the budget. If you turn to the second page and look at, just above it, it says total revenue over expenditure fund 100. The 100 account, there's a 0 there.
Oh, sure,
So
sure.
that's our general fund budget. So with that in mind, with all the revenues, we're about $67,000 ahead. But because of some of the things I said with some of the revenues that we're getting that I don't expect to continue, along with, some savings that maybe won't continue, I'm suggesting that we move forward with this, and we can, maybe at this point, we'll skip ahead just to talk about the tax rate. So let's skip ahead to this page that has all kinds of numbers on it. It says, notice of public hearing on the top. If you look at the very top of this, our assessed value dropped slightly from 192 in 18 to 190. This is totally different than the equalized value. That does not include TIF, and we're actually reached out to Nick Marks today from Bomar Appraisals to try and get some reports to try and figure out why this was the majority of it was in commercial, correct? Yeah, all of it commercial. So we're digging into that a little bit, but we can't control that number. That's through the state. So there's a lot of numbers in here, and what this does is basically what we do is we set our levy amount at the $1,556,000, I think it was approximately, which is a 2% increase over last year. And then we back into our tax rate. So even though we raised that by 2%, at the end of the day, if you look way down the bottom of this page, from the rate in 2019 was $9.03 per thousand. Next year, as proposed, it would be $9.14, which is a 1.2% increase to a homeowner's tax bill. So that is the local rate only. We're making some assumptions right now. We don't have the school districts, the counties, and marine parks. We don't have those levy amounts right now. If those stay the same, we would actually see a reduction in that at the overall rate. If you look down at the bottom, it's negative 0.19%. That's assuming they all stay the same. Obviously, some of those are going to increase. It's not going to move by much, though. So I would expect the overall tax rate for the village residents and business owners and property owners in general would be very similar to last year overall. Our rate is showing right now as a 1.2% increase. That equates to, about, it's 11 cents per thousand. So in a $100,000 home, that's $11.
Can I ask
per
you
year.
a question? How does this 1.2% relate to this negative 0.19? What's the math on that?
So it has to do with the assessed values going down.
Okay.
Then, if you take the same rates,
Uh-huh.
but if you use the same rates and multiply by a smaller number, it
Right.
reduces it. Well, because we're only about a third of that, and you take the other 2/3 and multiply it by a smaller number.
When you say we're only a third of that, what does that mean?
Well, we're a third, the total tax rate is $24.45.
Okay.
We're only $9 of that, so
Oh,
that's
okay.
about a third,
Okay.
a little more than a third.
Yep.
So if you take the other 2/3 and multiply it by a smaller number, 190 million instead of 192 million,
Okay.
you're reducing that. That's why it's reducing it. I don't expect it to be negative,
Uh-huh.
because we don't know those numbers yet.
Mhm.
But it'll be, I would expect, not that we need to be concerned about what anybody else is doing, but it is beneficial sometimes to know that even though we're up 1.2%, the overall tax rate in the village is only going up 0.5% or something like that, but we won't know that.
That's because we have a smaller piece of the total? Or like, I guess I don't understand, like if we are increasing
But, yeah.
1/3 by 2% and the other 2/3 we're keeping at 0, how do you get it to?
Because we're multiplying it by a smaller number than it was last year.
Multiplying what by a smaller number?
This. times that,
Uh-huh.
give us our overall tax rate. So,
Just, you understand that 2/3 of that's county, the school,
Yep,
yep.
county,
yep,
DC.
right.
So if you take that, you know, the way this calculation works, if you take that's the other portions of this, the other 2/3, okay, and you multiply it, divide it out, or multiply it out, however you wanna look at it, into a smaller number,
Mhm.
it's gonna decrease that rate,
Okay,
right?
sure. I'm not sure I understand, but you don't even explain it to me in front of everybody.
Okay.
Maybe you can explain it to me some other time.
And Chris, can you do a better job of explaining it than?
I think you just have to show it on the numbers.
Yeah.
I think too, yeah, maybe if we actually give you the spreadsheet and you
Uh-huh.
can look at the formulas.
Yeah.
And then maybe that'll
Yeah.
help.
I mean, it just seems counterintuitive
Yeah, thank
if
you.
our assessed value is going down.
Yeah,
I
I
would
know.
think the levy would go up more than 2%.
Well,
because
and
if we're
then
putting it over a smaller,
what you also have to keep in mind too, which the reason our rate stays down along with everybody else too is because our tax increment went down so much from 607,000 to 512.
uh-huh,
That obviously keeps the rate down also, because everybody's rate, you know, what they're
Their
contributing
pool
to
is
TIF.
larger.
You know, now they're not contributing as much to TIF, they're contributing less to TIF. That's gonna
Yep.
bring that number down.
That's the other piece of this, yeah.
That's the other piece of it too, is that tax increment number, that 512.
Mhm.
And the thing of it is too, is we don't get the school credit number until November. I mean, we'll have it
We'll have it for the 18th.
for the 18th, yeah, and maybe we'll have it for the 4th, it just depends. I mean, the assessed value number is actually probably a week or two earlier than we got last year, so maybe the state's a little quicker, but that school district credit is will play a huge part. I didn't hear that it's gonna go down or up, but we just don't know.
Mhm. So, with what is in front of you, with what we've talked about, and all of things considered, I think we're in a pretty good position. I was probably a little bit surprised when Chris and I played with this budget sheet, and then that summary, Chuck remembers this summary page, you know, you keep looking at the summary page throughout the entire process, and like, where are we at, and it kept staying in the positive. And I was a little surprised by that, based on some of the things we're faced with health insurance and other things, but we've also saved some money in some other areas with, you know, some rearranging of positions over the last few years, so all in all, and the revenues are up a little bit, so all in all, we're in a good position. I do feel like this is a very fair proposed budget as it sits right now with a 1.2% increase. I do have one more handout to kind of just, yes, this is just something I put together as a visual. And honest, that was both pages, sorry, there's
Oh.
2 pages. This is something it's 2 pages, so that's it. This is something, you can send that down to, if they want to look at it. That I think would be beneficial for residents to see. Give one here.
You want to run the file?
You can-
Oh, that's two, those go together. There's two.
We want one for Randy. Put one on Randy's desk. Thank you. So, all I did here basically was take what's in this budget, and our portion of the budget at least, not the county or everybody else's, and said, what does this mean to a homeowner that has a $100,000 house, and looking at it on a monthly basis, because everybody kind of looks at their bills on a monthly basis. So what that means is it's $76.58 per month for a typical $100,000 homeowner that they're paying to the general fund, for general fund costs. This is what makes up that $76 and the percentages, as you'll see, and you know, that take it for what it's worth, I guess. It's just, it's nothing more than a visual. I mean, it's not super, you know, you can really pick it apart and make some assumptions on it, but it's really just kind of to create a visual and some dollars and cents for people to look at and say, well, I'm paying $12.94 a month for public works, and that includes all the streets and everything. I mean, when you start talking in terms like that, I think it's a pretty powerful tool, to be honest. I did include, because Public Works is so inclusive of so many different things, it was very simple to do, so I did include as a secondary thing, the breakdown of that Public Works. So it's nothing more, it's really nothing it was just more of something that was fun to look at, I guess, in my eyes, and useful, I think.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
So it's really, like, there's nothing I'm gonna say, well, we need to make this pie, part of the pie smaller or larger. I just thought it was neat to see, so. It's for your own use. And I think we will put something like this together when we are done with the budget, because homeowners do ask, what am I paying my taxes for? And this is something we can hand out, so.
Sanitation is pretty tight, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but this is pretty bad.
Yeah,
That's recycling also, I believe.
I get it, but it's still, it's not saying it's not wrong, but it's pretty light compared to, I'm gonna guess what you're thinking, instead of much on the sanitation.
we could put it on there.
Streets, you know.
Yes, that'd be some, the capital projects portion, obviously, that's debt service.
Did you say we could put this on the website?
We could put it on the website, we put it in the villager, yeah. I think it's beneficial,
Yeah, I agree.
so,
Thank you.
something I learned at my clerk camp.
How to make pie
Or
charts.
I picked this up from another, Wauwatosa does something similar, so I was sitting in a class and I thought, well, that'd be nice to do, so. With that, that pretty much wraps up the 2020 general fund budget. We still have utilities to go through. If there's any questions at this point about anything we talked about tonight, if not, this is what we'll be moving forward with for the publication and public hearing on the 18th.
Anybody have anything else for Nick?
Just thank you.
Mhm.
I think you do a great job. You're always looking for, ways to save money and being creative about different things. So I know this is a lot of work, so thank you for putting it together.
Yep.
Yeah, if you tell staff we appreciate it, Chris.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly not by myself, so.
So if there's, so no action, then just.
No action tonight, really. I mean,
All right, moving down to communications. Chuck, when's Pancake Day? When is Pancake Day?
November 9th, second Saturday in November.
All right. Any other communications? Any new business? Need a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Need a second? Need a motion by Price, second by Will to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Adjourn. Thanks for coming.